Hello friends, welcome to my channel, a channel for learning simple coding. If you find this video to be helpful, please like, share and subscribe my channel. One by one we have completed 20 classes on Next.js. Now in class number 21, we are going to understand how to use client component within server component in Next.js. Now under this topic, we are to cover 4 interview questions also, like how to create client component, how to create server component, how client component is different from server component, and how to use or call client component within a server component. That we are going to cover. Let's start the practical. Here under the web roots, I create one folder. I say server comp, means server component. This would be the root. Under this I create page.js. As we know that under every routes we have a default file page.js. So by default when I am creating it RAFCE like this, I create this component by using snippets shortcut, and here I display, here I say h2, I say server components. Remember, by default when I create any component in Next.js, that component is called server component. Remember that. The second question, how to create server component. So you can see that normal component which I created like page.js or other component, if I create by default component without putting any kind of extra line or setting, all these components or become server side components. So I can remove React also from this because it's a pure Next.js server side component. Now within this same routes I create one more component. I say change name.js or JSX. Here I say RAFCE again, snippets, change name. Remember that. Now by default this component is also called server side component. Remember this. But if I try to use here a use state, like I take a variable, I say set name, and here I say use state, or I use any hook or any React command within any server side component, that component cannot be run as a server side. Remember that. By default like this, it's a server side component. I am not using any React command or React library or React components, React hooks, anything I am not using here. So it is server component. But here I am using use state hook, or if I use effect hook, or I use other kind of hook or library from a React side. So this component will become client side component. But we have to represent it as a client side, otherwise it will generate error. So we have to put as a first line use client. Remember this. We have to put it as a use client because we are using a React command here. That's why we have to call it as a use client, otherwise it will be a server component, and within a server component you cannot use React hooks or React library. Now we try to make something here. We want to change the name, so I say here h2, I say name, or I say welcome to, and here I put the name, so I say here name like this, and I create a button here, and I use class name for button bootstrap btn bt and warning like this, and I say change name. Remember, change name. For changing a name I need an event, so I create one more function. I say change name, and this would be arrow function. So within this function I say set name, and I change to Dr. Vipin classes, and by default name here I can give Dr. Vipin Teotia, for example, like this I give, and here I need to call event on click, and here I pass the event change name like this. Done. So everything is ready. Now I need to run this server side component first, or I need to include this component in a navigation also. If by default you see that in navigation I did not include this component because I just created, so I go for nav bar here. Under this nav bar I just copy once again this and I paste it like this, and here I say server side server component COMP, because server side is already available, and I say slash server comp like this, and I save this. You will see that one more navigation is there, server comp. If I click here, you will have this server component. Remember that you having this output only, this one server component, and you see that one more information is coming here, web layout information. This information is coming because we have included web layout also. We have included layout also. This layout we have. So under this layout we are getting this information. So what is the layout and how to use layout I have explained in previous video. So just I am explaining you here that this output is coming because of the layout, and this is the server component, and it is coming from page.js file. So far we have not called this, but we have created here server component and client components. You see that there are two questions here, how to create client component. So any component which you create, and this component use React hooks or React library, that we have to declare as a use client. So if we declare this keyword at the top of the component, that component become client component. So we can say that this is client component. Normal all the component in Next.js which you create without this keyword, means without this use client keyword, means you see that here we do not have any kind of React library or React command or use client command. That means it is a server component. Remember. Now how client component is different from server component. So I have explained previously also. Again I am explaining you that if you want to use React library or React hook or React functions, React concepts in your component, because Next.js is depend on React. Remember that we have to use React in Next.js, but this React work only at client side. At server side we have to use Next.js component. Both the component in look and feel are same, they are not separate, but the way of execution is different. This component called by server side rendering, and this component is called by client side rendering. So we have to mention at the top of the page that this page is client side, this component is from React side, and it will be rendered at client side. So client side rendering will support this component, that's why we are declaring it as a client side. So in server side component you cannot use any React library or React hook, remember that. And one more thing, most important thing, that if you want to make some event handling, for example I have event handling here, that I create a button, and on the click of that button I am going to change the name. For the name I have a state variable, that means it's a pure React concept. And event handling we are using, if you are using a event handling, so this event handling is not possible in server side component. Remember that in this server side component we cannot handle any event, it cannot support, because if you will use a event handling, that means you have to use React concepts, and if you will use React concepts in any component, then that component have to be client component. Remember that. So server component cannot use event handling. We cannot create any kind of concept of event handling in server side component. Only client side component can have event handling or React hooks or React library or React components. Now the last question from this topic, how to use client component with server component. If you want this server component should handle event also, then you have to use any client side component within a server component. So like in this page.js I am going to use change name. So change name here I am going to use it here. So this change name is what? This change name component is available in same directory server component, and it's a React component. So this React component have proper event handling. So I will use this event handling component or React component or client side component within a server component. You see this is a page is a server component. So I use it, I call it, you see this component is coming here. As I click on this change name, this name is changed to Dr. Vipin classes. Once again I refresh it, you see server component, welcome to Dr. Vipin Tevatia. This is coming from the client side, client component, and this is the part of server component, and I click on this and it's changed to this Dr. Vipin classes. So proper event handling is happening here because of the client component, and server component is calling this client component. So this part is execute on server side, only this part client side event handling or React library part will be rendered on the client side. Remember that. So this is a client component that will render at client side, and this all is server component that will render at server side, and server will call this and it will load into the client browser, and client bound browser with the help of React library it handle this. So once again, see this 4 questions we have covered. What is client component? Client component is a React component. You can understand in a single word that all the React components are client component, and by default component are the next.js components. So all next.js components are called the server components. In client component we always have a first line use client like this, and if you are using any React library, then you have to create that component as a use client. And if you want the event handling in your component, that component must be client component. Server side component cannot be used for event handling. Difference between client component and server component I have explained you just now. How to use this, I have told you that. Just simply how to use this client component within a server component, I have explained this also. Like this, you can use here, you can import component and call it here like we do in React. So same we have here. So server component is calling now client components. So I think you understand now what is client component, what is server component, and what is the difference between client and server component, and how client component we can use within a server component. So each and everything you know. If you like this video, if you understand all the concepts, please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you for watching this.